Okay. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. My name is Molly Reed, and I do a lot of bicycling, mainly around town. And when David said he was glad when I stopped, I was really glad when I stopped. So as you see on this screen, we made it not all the way across the country, but we made it 2/3 of the way. And here is a map of the route that we followed and how far we got. Okay. So I went with my older brother, Skip. I have 3 brothers, all of whom are very athletic and older than I am, and my life dream has been to be able to keep up or beat them in anything. So my brother said, our oldest brother went across country about 10 years ago, and then Skip said, I'm going next summer. And before I had a chance to think about it, I said, me too. And I thought, what have I just committed to? So once I said that to my brother, I was clearly committed. I sent him maps. I bought maps over last Christmas and sent him maps because there is a company that creates routes across the country and all over the United States. And I'll just pass these out if you want to take a look at them. It's a pre-established route, so you don't have to figure out what roads to go on or where there are motels or where there are restaurants. These maps tell it all for you. Can I have that one? I'm going to give you this one. Okay. So this is a company called what's it called? Transamerica Cycling. It's called Adventure Cycling. I knew that. And so we bought these maps. So once I sent them to my brother, he said, okay, I guess that means we're really going. Now, my family said, fine, go, have a great time. I have 2 teenagers. They thought it was no problem to have me take off. And unfortunately, nor did my husband. But my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, did not like the idea at all of him taking off. They've been married 50 years, and she was in a panic. So it was lucky we got out of there. This map is, you all have an example here, and these maps are great because they have exactly where to go. Each map covers about 300 miles, and it tells you the route to follow, and it tells you where the grocery stores are, where the camping sites are, etc. It also has on the back of it a topography map, which is a little daunting. And I didn't really study the maps beforehand because I was afraid I wouldn't go. And so it has topography, and it also, each map has a section on the history, a section on the natural environment, and a section on ride conditions that include things like the next 20 miles will have no shoulder, trucks will be zipping by you at ungodly rates, and please bail if a truck comes too close. So when I started reading that, I just talked to my husband about this. He said, all you're doing is stressing the traffic. And I'm trying not to just stress the traffic, but that was the only real downside to this whole trip. So anyway, so these are the maps. They came in quite handy, as you can imagine. Okay, so I went down to Baltimore, and we decided to go. Many people go east to west. We decided to go west to east. The reason being, well, I wanted to go east to west because, of course, that's the way the United States developed. And you get a much better sense of history, in my mind, if you kind of do it the way we inhabited the country. But my brother and I are not very organized and not very good at getting any place on time. So we decided we better go west to east because we could arrange an airfare out there, and then we could get back whenever we got back. Whereas if we'd gone east to west, we would have a pre-existing reservation. We may or may not make it. Okay, so we did it the other way. So we got as far as the Chicago airport, no problem. Although my brother was already saying, I want to be on a bike. I hate airplanes. But there we are in Chicago. And then we went on to Portland and flew into Portland, where Portland is a very bike-friendly city and had actually a bike stand right there at the airport for free that you could use to set up your bike. Okay. And there, my brother's doing all the work, and I'm taking pictures, which he seemed to think was a repetitive theme throughout the trip. We spent the night with cousins and then got a ride out as far as Astoria, which is on the coast. Lewis and Clark spent some time out there. We were frequently coming across the Lewis and Clark Trail and the Oregon Trail, so we got a lot of experience or a lot of knowledge about that. So there's our gear. We have 2 bikes. My brother's bike is one that he's ridden for 40 years, and he wanted to get all the use out of it he could. Mine, I'm lucky to say I have a wonderful husband who built me a bike just for the occasion. So mine was ready to go, even put it in blue and yellow, which are my favorite colors. Now, we had a lot of gear because we were planning to camp, and we did camp most of the time. But the gear you see there are tents, sleeping bags, clothes for the Rocky Mountains, clothes for the plains of Kansas. So we had a lot, 45 pounds each of gear. There, we got it from off the ground, and we successfully got it onto our bikes, and off we go. Okay, on the first day, and that's just leaving Astoria. Our first part of the trip, as you can see, was along the Oregon coast. And so this is a picture of a much photographed spot called Twin Rocks, Rockaway Beach. It was a lot of rain, beautiful scenery. We did stop periodically, and my brother always wanted to be on his bike, but I made him stop. And so here we are at a cheese factory eating 4 scoops of ice cream, because on a trip like this, you can eat whatever you want. We each lost 10 pounds during the time, and we ate whatever we wanted. There's our first campsite. My brother had said to friends of his that had ridden across country, what's your one piece of advice? If you could give one piece of advice, what would you do? They said, take 2 tents, because at night, you're going to be so tired of each other, you're going to need to be in your own space. Reasonable advice. I said to him, bring all the tents you want. I'm sleeping in your tent with you. So, there you see, I won, and we had 1 tent. And the good news is we're very much alike. People get us confused. I wore earrings the entire trip, so people knew who the girl was. And we ate peanut butter. We ate a lot of peanut butter and cheese. Later, we supplemented that with carrots and an occasional Cliff Bar. So, but that was a typical meal, and there was our tent site. He spent a lot of time, yes. We started in early June, and we were home by early August. We were supposed to be out there until early September, but we made it through early August. So this, he said he did the whole time. I like to sleep late. He likes to get up early. So he'd get up early, get ready to get on the road, and I'd still be in the tent. So he spent a fair amount of time waiting for me, which we're still discussing. Okay. One of many flats. There he is changing the flat. A frustrating thing as a woman was that whenever I'm around capable men, they have more experience changing flats, and they do it quicker, and they always do it. So here he is changing a flat. It is on his bike. But I had to finally get rid of him for a day so that when I had a flat, I got to change it myself. But more about that. Okay, here we are again in Oregon now, heading inland a little bit, and here's the sign, Tsunami Hazard Zone. That was my first real time when I missed Vermont. I'm thinking, okay, ice storms are bad, blizzards are bad, but there are no tsunamis. So we didn't experience one while we were there, but you saw those signs all over. We stopped partway up a big hill and watched people both paragliding and hang gliding off a cliff, which was beautiful. And we ended up in a place called Sand Lake, which is clearly named for obvious reasons. It was just a lake totally of sand. There were RVs zipping around. I could always hear them, but when I'd go up and peer over the side of the lake, the RVs hid because it was illegal. So I never did see an RV, but not an RV, ATV. So anyway, they were there, but I didn't see it. But it was a really cool thing to look at. These were all over Oregon, anywhere in Oregon, espresso stands. And you could drive right up, drive right through with your espresso. I've never seen anything quite like it. As we drove through, we went to a farmer's market. And this farmer's market had 3 stands. Most of them were strawberries and something out there called Marion berries, which were developed by the University of Oregon many years ago and are a local favorite. So we ate a lot of strawberries, and then I met Charlie Two Bears, a Native American from the area, who said to me, he made jewelry. He said, please pick anything I've made and you can wear it and have it, because I want you to have good memories of Oregon. So there's a necklace that he gave me. We mainly camped, but there's a great organization called Warm Showers. Has anybody heard of Warm Showers? Okay. It's an organization online of bicycle tours, and you can either email or call people, and they're fellow cycling tourists, and they're apt to say, yes, you can stay at my house. And you get a shower, generally a bed, or maybe a place to set up your tent, and good company that can tell you about the area and also share your love of cycling. So when you walk in covered with mud, they're not surprised. They've seen that before. Okay? So there's just one of the gentlemen, Dennis, that we stayed with in Corvallis. One of the men we stayed with in Warm Showers told us how to get into his cabin that was about 3 hours away from where we had stayed with him. He told us how to get in his cabin, and we just went up there, got the keys where they were hidden, and were able to stay in a nice cabin with heat and light, running water, which at that point was pretty much of a luxury from all the nights that we spent camping. we were lucky enough to be in Mackenzie Pass out in Oregon in the beginning of the summer, where the road was snow-free enough that bikes could go by, but cars couldn't yet. So it was closed to cars, which I really got a big distaste for automobiles while I was on this trip and the traffic. So this was a wonderful thing that no cars could come. And there it is at the top. You can see they're just about to open it to cars because it's really quite passable. But it was just a beautiful, beautiful ride. There we are at the top, 5,325. I'm the one on the right. And the top has got lava, and it was just beautiful. And to put that in perspective, a lot of people, has anybody here ridden like Middlebury Gap? Okay, the gap's around here, and I think Middlebury is 2,144 feet, and here we are at 5,325. Of course, it doesn't start at sea level, but nonetheless, it's a pretty steep climb. We were glad to be at the top. Those are the three mountains called Three Sisters outside of a place called Sisters, Oregon. Oh, okay. Buttes in Oregon. I was just interested to see all the different topography, the different climates, and the different types of people, and that's just something obviously we don't see here in the Green Mountains. One of many cafes where we stopped. That woman, the host, was very chatty. She talked more than me and my brother, which made me know that she was very, very chatty. But she told us about the area, and it was a nice place to eat. We ate in a lot of cafes. Here's a town called Mitchell, Oregon. It was famous for uranium mining many years ago, and now, like almost all the towns we went through, it's basically practically a ghost town. It's really amazing. So that's really the town right there. And they let you camp for free in the city park. So there we were, very primitive, but they had bathrooms across the road. And we met a young girl from Australia. She's 25 and had decided to cross the United States by herself. We leapfrogged a lot, so we got to know Anna quite well, but she was no bigger than a minute, but very independent and very capable. The Painted Hills in Oregon, part of the John Day fossil beds. Back in the Civil War days, Union folks were out there looking for gold to send to the north to help have enough money to fight the war, and they also found a lot of fossils, so that began a whole new exploration of that. This is just some geologic formations which just happen to be beautiful. I'd taken all my bags off my bike, and I had ridden back down to that. And when you've been carrying 45 pounds, how many people have done touring, loaded touring? Take those bags off and you could fly. So that was a nice day and a beautiful scene. Oregon Trail is all up and down there, and there we are outside of Prairie City, Oregon, with a Conestoga wagon and just showing the different forms of transportation that you can use across the country. It made me realize how glad I was to have these maps. Roughly 300,000 people crossed the United States on the Oregon Trail, having no idea what was next, what was going to happen to them, where they were going. And I had these maps that told me everything. So I decided that even though it was hard work, it was easy compared to what some of our ancestors have done. That's just the east side of the Cascades, coming out of the Cascade Mountains, very dry. The water is all on the coast and on the west side of the Cascades, and just showing you the water. There was water in the rivers at this point, but not much water in terms of rainfall. Now we arrived in a little town called Halfway. I never did figure out what it was halfway between, but it was clearly halfway between something. A nice little town that we went into and stopped at an artist cooperative. Reminded me a little bit of Frog Hollow or something you'd find here in Vermont. It turned out that the people working there and visiting all sang. So I said, would you mind singing? And they said, we would love to sing for you. And they burst into a song, which I am a terrible singer, but it goes, come wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Anybody know that? You know it if you heard it, the real version. But it was a song that we sing at the Unitarian Universalist Church all the time, so I felt like I was right back in Vermont. We went on and ended up in Idaho. We went through a place called Hell's Canyon, which is along the Snake River. It felt like it was probably 90 degrees, sun beating down, rattlesnakes all around. And we ended up going by the Brownlee Dam and spending the night halfway up a pass. Here's a local campground host who's showing us rattlesnake rattles that he had collected. And they're with salt in bags. He said the salt helps them from smelling bad or decomposing. And he did say, when you're in this country, be careful when you get up at night to go to the bathroom because there are rattlesnakes around. So that was a little on the scary side for me. We did do wash. We wore the same clothes a lot, but we did do wash once in a while. And there's the wash just drying in Council, Idaho. Out there, I was amazed because I'm an East Coaster. And every time I usually use my dryer, I hate to say it, but things take so long to dry here. You'd hang things up out there, and because of the lack of humidity, it was dry like that. So that was a whole new thing for me. That was not, that was something we faced more than I would have liked to. And so you can see here, there's virtually no shoulder and huge trucks coming by as we go through ravines. At this point, I've bailed, and I'm just taking a picture back. And my brother and husband keep saying there was more than traffic, but when I think back to it, I remember the traffic. But anyway, I'm here, so that was a good outcome. 2 little girls with 2 little kittens, just along the roadside. A lot of Native Americans still out there. This is along the Little Salmon River. Native Americans using baskets, big baskets to catch salmon. It looks like she's caught her son, but no, indeed, she has a salmon in that basket. And I stopped there, and there were people all parked, zillion fishermen parked, and fisherwomen parked all along the road. And I stopped by and bought some salmon already cooked that a bunch of them were making for their dinner, and they sold me for $5 a huge piece of salmon. So that was nice, already cooked. One of the places we spent the night, Riggins, Idaho, along a little beach. There were no campgrounds, so we just rough camped it. It was beautiful, a little windy, and so my brother said, just get in the tent so it won't blow away, and the wind will die down when the sun goes down. So we did that. He and I can sleep through anything, so we slept very peacefully all night, woke up, and the tent was full of sand. So it had not died down, but it was not a problem. We had a nice time and woke up the next day to that. Just riding through these little towns and meeting people that you wouldn't normally meet was fascinating. This woman's name was Martha. She lived in Stites, Idaho all her life. She was afraid it was turning into a ghost town, going to turn into a ghost town. It already, to me, looked like a ghost town, but she was more worried about the future. She had put together very proudly this display of Stites, Idaho, and all the battles that had been fought around between Native Americans and U.S. Army, and had all the high points. She took us outside and showed us a hill where there had been a battle, and just really interesting, very proud of where she lived, as were many people. My brother kept wanting to ride, so I kept trying to distract him. Here we are in a hot spring on a rainy day, just having a nice time, and him complaining, but he was willing to at least go swimming for a little bit. Just Bitterroot Valley, Montana, just some beautiful things. You can see a little bit of Vermont, cows and mountains, but you can tell nothing really like what the Green Mountains and our dairy cows look like. I thought my brother and I were pretty strong and pretty great, but we ran across a couple. This little boy is 2 years old. His name is Whistler, and he and his family are going across the country with him at 2, and he's riding in that little trailer. So that was pretty phenomenal. You could see his little bike down there. He didn't have to carry any bags, but they would periodically stop and let him ride his little bike around on the trail. So this day we're on a bike trail. A lot of days we were on roads. There were different parts of the country where you actually had a bike trail paved, so you were out of the traffic, and that was a nice break. One of the places we stayed, I had ridden in there and promptly fallen on the gravel, broke off my mirror, which again, anybody that tours or spends a lot of time on a bike knows a mirror is a valuable asset. So a few days later, I was able to get it put back on. They had goats at that lodge. This is Oscar, and they kept Oscar chained up. They have a goat named Felix. They didn't chain him up because Felix just follows Oscar around. So it's just nice to see animals and something other than my brother once in a while. Okay, here we are at the Battle of Big Hole Interpretive Center. Again, more Native American and U.S. Army history, and just showing bikes versus a teepee. In yet another town, this is called Jackson, Montana, not to be confused with Jackson, Wyoming, a very little town. And there you are at a general store, and look at how barren the shelves are. So here we are, Skip's trying to find something to buy to give them business, and there's not much choice there. Yeah. The next guy we met, David Miller and his dog Max. Again, I was impressed with myself, but he was taking his dog all around in that little trailer. Not only that, he had just turned 50, and he was going across the country for the 3rd time, trying to hit every state, 50 states for 50 years. So he was a pretty impressive guy, and Max was a sweet dog, very patient. There were two trailers. There's a trailer of his stuff is in the back, and then he's using this trailer for the dog to ride around in. This is a beautiful place that we stayed, Alder, Montana. Those hills in the back are called tailings, and they're left over from the gold mining era, and that's just what's left over. It was a beautiful place to stay. It was a little scary because when we checked into the campsite, the gentleman that checked us in had had a few drinks, had a lot of drinks, an older guy, and he said, "Where are you from?" My brother said, "Baltimore, Maryland." And he said, "And you?" I said, "Vermont." "Vermont, you'll be lucky if you wake up alive. You might be in the bottom of that," and he said, "You might end up in the bottom of that little lake." And he said it with a twinkle in his eye, but he just assumed that because I was from Vermont, obviously I was progressive, and he didn't think much of it. So that was an interesting. And then he called me cupcakes, and then my brother was about to hit him. But anyway, we got through it. And we are going through then a couple of cities, Nevada City and Virginia City, which are kind of like old mining towns. This one's actually was created to look like that. It's from a lot of buildings from around the area that they put together and made very touristy. We stopped because there's a bakery, in which I had 6 cookies. Oh yeah, then there's another town right above it called Virginia City, which is actually old and authentic, although it's now touristy, but it's actually the old buildings that had been there. We then, this is in the evening, which I'm not sure you can tell, but that's the full moon. And it was beautiful. It was in a campground, very primitive, and so there were apt to be bears and things, but we didn't run, but we did have bear boxes, metal boxes where we kept our food. They had them provided. And it had been a hellacious day of headwinds, the 25-mile-an-hour headwinds for hours, and I was glad to be there, primitive or not. Earthquake Lake, where there was an earthquake in 1959, 28 people were killed, and it dammed up and actually created this lake. A very windy day. We were in an interpretive center taking this picture, and it was so windy I could hardly get my bike around the corner. So, but you can see that's all these, 50 or 60 years later, and still the topography's quite changed. Who can figure out where this might be? Yellowstone, says it right, Yellowstone, and there you are with the bison and the cars rivaling each other for the road. Geothermal activity in Yellowstone, really pretty. And Old Faithful. So when we got to Yellowstone, my brother was quite out of breath. I should tell you, he's 70, he's had open heart surgery. So the idea of going on this trip was a little scary for him and me and his wife, which I've already mentioned. And he was feeling badly here. He was having trouble getting his breath, his heart wasn't working quite right, and I was scared to death because I wanted to get him home safely for his wife. He's also my best friend in the world, so it was pretty scary. He does not take direction from me, so when I said, let's go to the clinic, he said no. But he eventually thought about it himself and decided to go. By the time we were done at the clinic, they said, all you have is altitudes, just altitudes, so don't worry, you can keep going. But at that point, we had 2 more passes to go through before we could get to the next campground. It's 5 at night. So I'm thinking, what are we going to do? I tried to stay. There are a lot of hotels here. Now we're in some civilization because in Yellowstone. But in the midsummer, the hotels are all booked, right? So there's no way to stay. So fortunately, the nurse at the clinic said, come back to our place and you can spend the night on the floor. And it was really an interesting view into what the workers there, like they live in this government housing, which are trailers, and not very glamorous at all, but very interesting to talk to these people who are sort of itinerant and go to Alaska and spend time in Yellowstone, go all over doing their stints with these great capabilities, talents, and skills that are transferable to different places. We made it down to the Grand Tetons. The most notable thing in that picture is you can't tell it, my brother's now wearing new pants. He wore the same clothes all the time. We managed to get him some new tights in Jackson. Between Jackson and a place called Jenny Lake Lodge, there's about a 25-mile bike path. Again, wonderful. It was hilly. Some bike paths are very flat and straight and ugly. This one was really nice and just great to be out in the traffic. There you go. I used to be a teacher at Aurora School, and there you always hear about Oxbow Lake. So we've got Oxbow Lane here in Weybridge, and there I just thought was an ideal example of an Oxbow River. This one day, my brother decides we're going to ride 103 miles through an Indian reservation where there's no place much to stop. I said I would, but then decided partway through that no, I wouldn't. So we got to this town of Du Bois, and I just started fooling around, and we went to the Bighorn Sheep Interpretive Center. We went to this, which I'm not sure what it was, but I made sure to dawdle long enough that going the next 60 miles across the Indian reservation was impossible. He was not happy. I was very happy. So that's Du Bois. The next day, we got up and went across the Indian reservation, and that is what it looked like. So you see just sagebrush, sagebrush, sagebrush. So he, at this point, had gone off on it by himself because he was so mad at me. He said, I'm going to go the next day. I'm just going to go as fast as I can, do what you want. I mean, a little nicer than that. But so here I am by myself going through this reservation. So interestingly, traveling with my brother, people have gotten us confused, and we have the same personality. We look alike. But when I was on this trip with him, everybody talked to him, and nobody would talk to me. I'd go up and talk to people, and they'd immediately look at him. So this was a great day in that I actually got to talk to people myself. And this lady and I had a long conversation. She's a Shoshone and has spent her life writing, or her working life, writing grants to bring money in for Native Americans. She told me about it and said that the Native Americans all live down the hill, and they're all Democrats, and the white people all live right in the town there of Crowheart and are all Republicans. She was glad that her grandchildren and children had gone on and gotten college educated and gotten out of there. But she had enjoyed her life doing this. Then I'm in the middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden an RV appears, and this family shows up from nowhere and gives me chocolate ice cream. So that was, they were from Germany and touring the United States. Very nice. Okay. Just some reminded me of, if anybody's been to Sedona, Arizona, that's just the red rocks, just a beautiful formation. Again, just kind of overwhelming to see this country at such a slow speed that you're appreciating all this difference in topography and Native Americans and the heat and the mountains. My oldest brother, Butch, came, and his wife Tina came out to meet me and Skip. And there we are in a godforsaken little town called Jeffrey with, there was maybe 30 people lived there. There was one restaurant open, which is where we are. There was no place to stay but a church, a Baptist church, and they opened it up and you could sleep in the basement of the church. And I'll show you that in a minute. There were about 20 cyclists there that night. And that is just a local guy who's came over and told us a joke and then just fooling around with my brother. I think he's had a hard life, actually. I found out later. He'd had a hard life, but he's doing a lot of drinking and those things. But he was a nice guy and entertaining, to say the least. There we are staying in the basement of the church, and just a whole lot of cyclists holed up in there, and we're looking at a computer, looking at each other's blogs and pictures of the trail. So there were a number of people that we rode with periodically during the trip. A lot of times it was just the two of us. Sometimes it was with a variety of people. You can't tell there, but this was the day I finally got to change my own flat tire. And the reason I show this is that it looks like the tire got the better of me because I am filthy. There's dirt everywhere. But I did successfully change the flat tire, and it was a banner day. The Oregon Trail, you can still see the tracks going through the countryside. And you can see now why this is called Split Rock. But if you've read anything about the Oregon Trail, how there's always a lot of description of these natural, formations. There's the word. That was a hard one. Natural formations. And you can see why, because people are just looking at sagebrush, 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 and there's nothing to differentiate one day from the next. And suddenly people have a way to orient themselves. So that was just one example of that. Split Rock, obviously. My two brothers telling stories about my father, which I won't regale you with here, but he was a little bit of a bad actor, but a lot of fun. So they are having a great time entertaining each other. What I found actually the most interesting was my brother just loved to ride, but what I loved was the days we had problems and we had to deal with people and really get to know the people in the countryside. That was the best part. So my brother, who's riding this old broken down bike, breaks his back rim. And so we have to hitchhike. So here we are hitchhiking, and the first person that drives by is Cheryl, who's a rancher and a home ec teacher, stops and picks us up. She's got 3 horses in the back. She puts our bikes in the back of her truck, and off we go back to the biggest city that we had just come through. So I love this. Then we're stopping with her. We have to go get her tire on her trailer fixed because it has a staple in it from a barbed wire fence. And there we stop, and this kid's name is Waddy, and he was a former student of hers. you can see how he's able to fix that tire in nothing flat. And he is about to go to a combine, which is, if anybody's a football fan, is some kind of place where high school kids go and, hi, Ann. And coaches watch them and see if they're going to give them college scholarships. So this guy has aspirations to be out of that town, and whether he'll succeed or not, I don't know, but I hope so. Then we stopped at another place, deliver one of her horses, and she's dropping off to another former student, and she's going to leave her horse there for a month to have that guy break her horse so she can come back and get him later. Skip in his glory, happy because we're now finally in Laramie, Wyoming, and where there's a big bike shop and he can get things fixed, and he's got his broken tire there and he's about to get it fixed, so he's happy. I'm exploring the town. Laramie was a very progressive, college-oriented town with a lot going on, very different from sort of the backwaters that we'd been in, and very exciting. I met a girl whose parents run number one auto parts here in Middlebury. The next day when we had all the bikes working, we got back on the road, we're still in Wyoming, and Skip goes, we've got to get to Colorado. It's 3 o'clock. I go, I don't want to go to Colorado. I want to stay here. It's raining. I want to stay in this nice campground we have. He says, too bad. So we get on our bikes in the rain. I am pissing and moaning. I am so mad at him. But we keep going till we get to the Colorado border. I say, that's it. We're in Colorado. I'm stopping. So there we are. Colorful Colorado. There wasn't much color. And the only place to camp was in a ditch. So that's what we did. We camped in a ditch. And I have to say that I made the mistake of admitting to him in the night, this is really a snug, nice little campsite. I'm having a good time. So which he hasn't let me forget. So it ended up being fine in spite of the rain and all we've gone through. Just a view in Colorado, just what I thought was some pretty scenery. So we don't get too far down the road and he runs over a nail. So his brand new rear wheel that has a new rim, just built, spent a lot of money, really a good job, wrecks it again, hitchhikes again. I'm way ahead of him for once. And this woman named Carol stops to pick him up. So we found another bike store, and they came over, actually came right to our hotel and fixed his bike for him. So we're back on the road. We rode down a very big, busy, truck-laden road with trucks some of these trucks try to go near you on purpose. I mean, they do not like cyclists, and they go by you, not trying to hit you, but trying to scare you to death, and they succeed. So finally we went on a route and we went around and we got off the main road. This map took us around a reservoir, and that was a welcome change, just a beautiful reservoir. You can see it's called, I don't know what that was about, but it's called the Green Mountain Lake, and it's fed by Otter Creek. So clearly there's some Vermonters out there. And there were also towns called like Sumter, so there were some Southern sympathizers who were living out there, because you had instead of Fort Sumter, they didn't spell it the same way, but it was definitely after Fort Sumter. So, and that was an interesting thing. So the next morning we got back on the road and we ended up in Silverthorne and then Breckenridge. There's a beautiful bike path that goes around that. And there we are riding between Silverthorne and Breckenridge, Colorado. We met for those of you that love to see just scenery, I'm sorry, because I really get a kick out of all the people that we meet. So this is a couple that's in the third year of a 4-year honeymoon on the road. So my comment to them was, if you can make it through 3 years on the road bicycling as a honeymoon, I think your marriage will probably last. So he is from Austria, she's from Switzerland, and what happens is this company has bike paths that go north and south and ones that go east and west. They had started most recently, South America and ridden up, and our routes just happened to cross briefly. But they had been to Europe, they'd been to Asia, they'd been all over. So we get to the top. This is the biggest, we crossed the Continental Divide, must have been 4 times. And this is the highest pass that we went on. There you have 11,539 feet. So we were glad to make the top of that. He did fine. My brother, once he got through Yellowstone and realized his health was okay, he really took off, and I didn't get any better, so he got to the point where he could leave me fairly readily. I have to admit that I did walk up part of this pass. I don't know what that is. Root cellar, side, house built into the side, just something that reminded me of things you read about the West that you don't see out here very often. we ended up in the strangest town I've ever been in, Guffey, Colorado. The map said it had 4 campgrounds and it was a bustling hive of civilization. Well, when we got there, this is what we found. This guy's name is Charlie, drinking a beer. We pull up, guess you want a beer? No thanks, I don't want a beer. There's his dog, and here's the town with a skeleton. It gets more interesting. There's my brother, who's let me say, he teaches at a prep school in Baltimore. He's very traditional, and he is walking around going, where have you brought me now? What is going on here? He's just totally baffled. You can see bathtubs and their old cars, and it gets more interesting. There is some of their decor. So skeletons of horses, and I don't know what it was just bizarre. So he's still baffled. He's not sure we should stay, but at that point, I'm not going anywhere else. They gave us 2 cabins, one for ourselves and one for our bikes. So I put my bike in that one, but my brother's so worried about where we are that he brings his bike into ours because he don't want anything to happen to his bike. And he has noticed that both of these cabins lock from the outside, but not from the inside. So he honestly says to me, I am scared that they're going to come lock us up in the middle of the night, and that's where they get their skeletons. I'm like, really, it's okay. You're really going to be okay. I don't think that's going to happen. But he did not sleep well that night, and I'm glad to say we got out alive. So there was a nice cafe right in that same little town, oddly, and that felt like a Vermont cafe. You know, so it was just really, it's just something you'd be used to when you walked in. So that was the only thing that sort of didn't fit in with the rest of the way it went. Stopping at a laundromat, and there he's looking at some hills coming up, and he's okay about it. I'm not so happy, but there we are, just doing our wash. What'd you say? That's a hill. Mountains. Oh, that was definitely a mountain. And we go into this little town called Florence, Colorado, meet this gentleman who's originally from Pennsylvania. He's bought one of the oldest buildings in town, and he takes us up to meet his wife. And they've used the bottom of the building as a hardware store. And then he's redone 2,600 square feet on the top, full of art and greenhouses and just beautiful. Just the last thing you'd expect as you ride through this town. And here you go up, and it's quite fancy and nice. We then headed towards Pueblo, Colorado, and you can see it's starting to get really dry. This is where there had been a river, and now you see cliffs, but no water. There, we did find some water, which just outside of Pueblo, there was one reservoir, and there I am. It's freezing cold, but it had started to get hot, and I knew it was going to get a lot hotter, so I took advantage of that water in spite of that. Driving through town, we're at the VFW post in Boone, Colorado. It's stopping at the bar, and it's July 20th that day, which is my daughter's 21st birthday. So I called her from there, which is an amazing thing, that technology. I just had my phone, and I took all these pictures with this little phone. I mean, I guess for those of you that have cell phones, you're not surprised, but I could take pictures, send them to my daughter to put on a blog. I could call her, text her. It was just amazing with just one little device, all the things that I could do. And you could use a GPS if you got particularly lost as well. Anybody, can you read what that says? Fairbanks Morse scales. So there we are from St. Johnsbury all the way out there. I always read that those were famous scales and used throughout, and there they are. There wasn't much to look at, so I ended up taking a picture of a rattlesnake. It's dead, unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not sure which. But we heard a lot of rattlesnakes, but I never did actually see one, other than that dead one. So my oldest brother had said, my piece of advice to you is between 12 and 3, always find a place where you can eat all you can, and it's air conditioned, and then ride in the morning and ride in the afternoon. Well, we couldn't find that, so here we are. I mean, it's 100 degrees, and all we can find is a store that's closed, so we lie down outside of it and just take a nap. And people are coming by looking for gas. The store's closed. They're mad because there's no gas, and we're going, we have nothing to do with that. Can't help you. Finally, the owner came back and took us into her store and let us buy drinks and snacks. And she said, oh, I'm sorry, I've been off branding cattle this morning. So that's where she had been. Can't let the story get in the way of what you really do. Going now through eastern Colorado and western Kansas, it is all the high plains. It is hot. It is dry. There are no trees. It is unbearable. I mean, it's 110. And so we'd be riding, and my crazy brother wants to ride at noon and 1. So I finally see a tree after about an hour. I said, we're going to go lie down under that tree, which we did. And then we went on to the next town, and I walked around till I found cars in front of one of the houses, knocked on the door, and this 93-year-old lady said, come on in, have lunch with me and my family. It was air conditioned. It was wonderful. It was Jell-O salad, who knew? But it was a wonderful reprieve. And so she had moved out here in the 1940s when she got married. So she and her husband moved out there to be with her in-laws. There was no electricity, no running water. She said all they had at that time was dust storms. But somehow, this many years later, she's still there. That's what Kansas looked like. A lot of grain elevators. a lot of grain elevators. Every now and then we break down and go to a motel. There it is, pink tile. Not what you'd want necessarily, but again, when you're camping out, it's a million degrees. It was the perfect place for us. Full cooked breakfast the next day. Now, that's a picture of my brother. I'm getting him to stop in convenience stores, libraries, and museums, and he's hating every minute of it. Let me go get on my bike. Let me go get on my bike. So here he is, we're at a convenience store, but you can see by his expression that he'd rather be on a bike. But these convenience stores, I never thought I'd come to love them. They were amazing. And people from around and about who didn't have air conditioning, older people would come stay in the convenience store, not live there, but be there from 9 in the morning till 5 at night, just talking to whoever walked in. It was fascinating. So now, I'm just going to tell you a quick anecdote that after this, riding between Scott City and Ness, I had a couple of bad things befall me. One was I was out riding and it was a beautiful day. I'm in high vis. Every day I wore bright yellow and I'm riding along. It's bright sun. I'm thinking, okay, nothing bad can happen to me. And with that, I felt wind in my left ear. And a van had come very close to me and just veered away at the very last minute. So I didn't get hurt. I didn't have to bail, nothing, but I came within an inch of being, and out there in Kansas, the roads are straight, flat, long. 75 miles an hour is not an unusual speed for those cars to be going. I mean, that's the speed limit in a lot of places. So that shook me up, so I pedal up to my brother and he goes, what? I thought that was somebody on a motorcycle. You haven't gone that fast in the whole trip. And I'm trying to catch up to him. So then we go into the next town, which is Dighton, Kansas, and we camp out in the city park again. And in the city park, there are spiders, which I didn't know about. And in the middle of the night, I woke up with a throbbing foot, only to find out I'd been bitten by a spider. And I have never had anything hurt so much. Well, maybe having children. But second to that, I've never had anything hurt so much. It was very, very painful. So by this point, I'm getting a little disillusioned and a little, up till then it had been an adventure, but pretty soon it wasn't so much of an adventure. So there we're staying so we go into this town called Ness City, and that's what it looks like. I mean, desolate. And so we hung out in the library for a while. I finally got to read. I had brought 2 books with me, Undaunted Courage, about Lewis and Clark, but soon realized that carrying an extra 5 pounds that I never was going to read wasn't worth it, so I shipped it home. And here I finally got to read a book because we were in the library. And I went to a clinic here where the clinician said, I can't really see very well, so I'm not so sure what's wrong with your foot. So that doesn't make me feel too good. He said, I think it's a blood clot. I said, yeah, how did I get a blood clot in the middle of the night when there's spiders? So anyway, I was getting nervous that he wasn't giving me the best medical attention. So we kept on going, and we ended up, which is a place advertised in these maps that's called Elaine's Bed and Breakfast Bicycle Oasis. My brother Skip, let's keep going. I said, no, I'm staying at a bicycle oasis. That's about what I need right now. So there we stayed. And my brother's anxious to get on the road. So I'm thinking I may need to go into Kansas City and actually have this bite looked at because it's not like any bite I've ever had. And I'm at this point thinking it's probably a brown recluse. Oh. Has anybody know anything about a brown recluse? Have you been bitten?
Yes, ma'am.
What happened?
It turned ugly brown and I thought my leg was going to fall off.
Yeah, and it eats the flesh. So I had convinced myself that's what I had. And so I've decided I've got to get to Kansas City. I am not going to fool around with the brown recluse. I don't think it was a brown recluse, but at that point I was convinced. So my brother gets back on the road. He's going to ride his bike, and I'm going to take a bus into Kansas City. Meanwhile, I stay at the Bicycle Oasis. They have a dog named Secret, a cat named Panda Bear, and life's looking pretty good for me. And my brother's long gone. So the guy that lives there takes me out. He's a contractor. He does work for all these local farmers and bales hay and does all that. So he took me out and I got to go ride on all his equipment. This is called a swather. And he goes through and makes like rows of hay to bale, swathe up. He swathed it. And then here's his baler. And this thing is an air-conditioned cab, and he has a computer program. It tells you exactly if you're going in the right direction and tells you everything you need to know. It's really exciting. So again, for me, this is the part that I thought was really interesting for whatever reason. That's what Kansas looks like. This is an oil rig. They go night and day, and these are small oil wells, and people own them individually sometimes. And there's just an example of what you see. Then I get on the bus. Now, all of a sudden, I'm on a rainbow bus, right? I have been in the whitest of the white area. And here I'm on a bus with all sorts of different nationalities and a big variety. So I've decided to go to Kansas City because that's the next city of any size where I have some confidence that the medical care is going to be good. Anybody know Gail Frieden? Yeah, she arranged for me, she grew up there. So she's a local friend, and she arranged a place for me to stay with her friends. So suddenly I felt like I was in Baltimore, in my suburban neighborhood where I grew up. And it was very nice. We went to a retirement community, had dinner with Gail's mother. And again, I've gone to these retirement communities and had dinner with my own aunt, so I knew the drill. I had to put on a dress and kind of change what I was doing, but it was a nice change, actually. So after that, meanwhile, I'm talking to my brother on the phone, and we've decided we're going to get back together and we're going to meet. So we go down. He's continued to ride across. So what we've made it this far, and here we split up, and he continues to ride his bike down here along this route. I take a bus up here to Kansas City. So we're parallel to each other, and he's about as fast as I am on the bus. He's on his bike. So we go down then and pick him up. I hired a friend, a woman I just met, to go down and get him. We got him so we could get back together to get back riding. Now, we were supposed to continue on the Trans Am Trail, but has anybody heard there's a rail trail called Katy Trail that goes through the length of Missouri. And the advantage of rail trail, as you can see, is that there's no traffic, it's flat, it's easy. So because I was still feeling a little nervous about the traffic, we went on this. And it was nice, although monotonous, and the surface was a little tough. But it was, again, it's 110 degrees. That's what, we talked about the drought. There's the drought, okay? There's the drought. That's typical, corn drying up everywhere. And farms having a bad way to go, and then even the little tourist areas, there are little cafes and things set up along this trail to cater to the cyclists. And a lot of those are closing. The people are saying we can't make it because with this drought, we don't have any cyclists. So it was very sad in many ways, all these little towns. For a variety of reasons across the country, a lot of the little towns weren't doing very well. We stopped along the trail and stayed with a woman who was the daughter of the lady that Gail had put us in touch with. This was another friend of Gail's. So she put us up, did body work. She was an artist, she and her husband. We had a great dinner, we saw artwork, and we had body work as well. So before we got back on the trail, so that was wonderful. So got back on the trail, and this is Jefferson City, Missouri, the capital. So we rode in there, we met a couple along the way. They said, you need a place to stay. We said, we'd love one. They were riding. They said, come to our place in Jefferson City. So we rode our bikes right there, and there we got out really early the next morning, and that's just the capital in the early morning light. So we met a lot of nice people, needless to say. At this point, I'm having real second thoughts about being there at all. So I decide I'm going to call my oldest brother, Butch, who'd already done this, who you've seen a picture of, and I said, he knows me well, he knows my brother Skip well, he's ridden across country, and he will give me sound advice. Because I feel like a wimp that I want to go home. I can't let down my brother. This is his bucket list, and I'm going to let him down. I am the wimpy little sister here again. I don't want to do it. But if I call my oldest brother, he'll have good advice. So I called my brother, and he said, and there my Skip's talking to my oldest brother, Butch, he said, get home. He said, if you're that scared and nervous now at this point and not having a good time, come home. So that was welcome advice. So I took that with no problem. Now, my husband says, I keep making it sound like it was terrible. It was a great summer. I had a wonderful time. The traffic was scary, and I've never appreciated Vermont as much as I do today, right? But that said, I'm glad I did it. I think, should I go back and finish it? I'm not sure I'm not sure. I think I'd rather ride through Weybridge and Cornwall and the Middlebury Gap. So I'm really, really debating. This is towards the very end of our trip. This is in Dutso, Missouri. I had hit 4 stationary objects by now. I've run into a bridge. I don't know what was wrong with me. I kept crashing. At this point, I think I crashed on purpose because I just did not want to ride on that trail anymore. And I go into a town, find a boy, hire him, and he takes me down the trail to where I'm supposed to meet my brother. He is 20. He says to me, Molly, I'm not very smart. I don't do well in school, but I have aspirations to get out of this town. I'm trying to get employed. My job right now is mowing grass, but there's no grass to mow. And so he doesn't have much money. He's living with his aunt. His mother was on drugs. I mean, he's just got a long way to go, and he's hoping to figure his way out of this town. But there's no very immediate route that I can see. But he was very nice. And I said, can you take me 20 miles down the road to Dutzow? He said, I've never been that far. I've never been there. He said, I have a car, but I've never been that far. And it was just straight down a highway, so off we went. It's very interesting. And that, we were supposed to stay at a campground. The map said there was a campground. There was none. Those were the restrooms, and we just camped in a field right next to it. And this is just like the very end of our trip. There we are the next morning, deciding now that what we're going to do is take a train, ride to a train station in Washington, Missouri, take the train into St. Louis, and fly home. We've agreed to fly home. So this was a sad morning, It was very sad. So, and I love my brother. He's like my best friend. So it was really hard for me to do that to him, but he was very nice. As you can see, very nice about it. So this is our last morning on the bikes. And then we went into St. Louis, took the train in, made airline reservations, spent one last night in a hotel in St. Louis, boxed up our bikes before we got back on airplanes. And he said, if we're going to go home, I'm going to go home now. So he went out very early in the morning. I stayed just into the afternoon. So here I am just dropping him off at the airport in St. Louis. And that is the end of our trip. So as I said, it was a wonderful trip. He's a wonderful brother. I'm really glad I got 2 months with him. He's already talking about going back out and finishing next summer. And I can hear his wife in the background going, no, you don't. You're not going anywhere. So whether we'll ever continue it or not, I don't know. But I do think bicycle touring is a great way to travel. You see people, you meet people, you see topography, you understand droughts, you understand the continental divide in ways you've never understood it before. You understand the way of life. And being from a fairly progressive area as we are, this was really back into an area that is anything but progressive, right? It's very, very Christian, very conservative in very many ways. In fact, when I left Elaine's Bicycle Oasis, they handed me a book which said the great controversy between Satan and God. And I think the guy was hoping I'd read it and become a devout Christian, which I am not. So it was very interesting. But what I came away feeling, I was also lucky enough to travel around the world a few years ago, I came away feeling that people are just very much alike, and that our political differences and our progressive and our conservative, or whether we're Hindu or Buddhist, I can't tell you how time and again I found that people basically are decent and basically the same and help each other and are worth it. And that's really important, even with my progressive attitude, to step back and say, wait a minute, everybody has a right to believe what they want. And we're all there together. We're all going to live, we're all born, we all die. So that's just a central thing I've gotten out of the travel that I've done, for better, for worse. And I don't know, that's what I've learned. So there you have it. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
The route you chose to take.
Yes.
East of it, then come south from it. Why that particular route?
Well, there were.
I know there are lots of the
There are 3 routes, and we decided we definitely wanted to stay with something that was already planned. They had 3 routes. The one across the south, we didn't want to do. It was definitely going to be too hot. The one across the north went a bunch into Canada, which was nice, but this went through a lot of states I had never been to before. And this is the first route that they ever devised. My husband had done it the other way 30 years ago, so it's just the one that we chose. In retrospect, if you're going to choose this, the time of year really matters. So in the winter, you'd be better off going through the south. This time of year, particularly in here, it was just way too hot. So it probably would have been better in the north. Yes?
I just wanted to point out, not saying you made a mistake in not finishing the trip, but east of the Mississippi is very different. Towns are closer together, greater population areas, more to see, more to do.
Yeah.
But you're right, sand and brush.
Are you Billy?
No,
No,
I'm not. But
John.
I cycle cross country.
You did. So, so I should get out there and finish it next.
If there are more, you have more options. It's not like the next town is 112 miles straight. You know, there are things to do there, places you can stop, there are more restaurants. It's kind of like Vermont, where we have small towns, but each of the towns has,
Yeah,
you know, it has some vibrancy.
yeah, which I didn't feel there. Well, that is good to know. And I tell you, even though day to day might have been more of a challenge, it was kind of interesting. You know, it's very interesting to ride through Kansas and see what it's really like. You know, even though day to day it wasn't necessarily interesting, but it was a fascinating slice of life. But thank you. That's motivating me to call him up and say, "Oh, we'll go next year." Barb, what'd you say your name? Hey, what'd you say your name was? Last name?
I like that funny blue bicycle through town a lot. If you've never seen that.
Yeah,
I rode a recumbent cross country.
yeah.
And I don't understand why you would not ride a recumbent, but that's your business.
Well, that's a whole nother. But we should let everybody leave who isn't a real bike techie, and then we can sit around and talk about that.
I have a couple of questions, Molly.
Yes, Barbara.
And you're fit, always, but did you do any special training? For this was one, and the other is, if you're comfortable talking about it, would you give me any ballpark about costs for this kind of thing? I haven't the vaguest notion,
Yes.
if that's something.
Okay. This can really vary. So this will vary a lot. I am generally really physically fit. My brother and I both ride our bikes continually. I ride around town most of the time. I was very fit when I went, but I didn't do anything particular to get ready for that. That said, I biked so much last summer that I've hardly been on my bike since. So I only biked 3 times in October. I'm just like biked out, and I'm hoping by next spring I'm back into it. But I have really not been doing it. But generally,
Any distance training for this at all?
well, you know, I do 18 miles a day generally, and I do 100 miles here and there, 80 or 50. So my general routine includes enough bike riding that one problem. Getting used to the weight was a big deal. And first, the bike's real wobbly because you have all this weight on it, and it carrying. But then when I got home and I did go on my bike, I was zipping up Middlebury Gap because you didn't have that. But that was hard to get used to, and I did not practice with that, which I probably should have practiced with the weight. Okay, the finances. The finances were such that my brother and I love each other, and we always share everything, and we try to pay for each other, and we back each other in every way, because we're exactly like, so what's not to like, right? I think he's perfect. So his wife was afraid that I was going to use all my money and pay for him. No, his wife was afraid he was going to pay for me. My husband was afraid I was going to pay for him. So they go, you got to keep track, you got to keep track. And he and I are looking at each other like, really? We do? So we ended up charging a lot, but we kept no track of anything. We just would laugh, and we say, we'll let our spouses duke this out later, right? So there's a paper trail going through these states, and they kept saying, are you keeping track? We go, no, but you're getting the statements, so you know. So they were going to balance it all out, but that never happened. So I have no idea what my brother spent, but I can tell you that I spent $3,200 because my husband just showed me. Now that's because I stayed in motels, and we ate out at least once a day. And so you can do it very cheaply, you know, and you can do it a lot more expensively. So ours was kind of middle of the road, motel here and there, something. And I spent
That didn't
$3,200.
include buying the bike, or it would have included the flights.
Included the flights, exactly, but not, I don't know if my husband put in my gear, because I bought a bunch of panniers and special gear that would be waterproof and that kind of thing. So it didn't but it did include the airfare. Yeah,
You were using Orlays for it.
I was.
Yeah. How did you like those? That's a type of tenure.
I had not done much, I mean, I've done a lot of bike riding, but not much touring. So I have nothing to compare to, but they were wonderful. They were totally waterproof. They were well designed. They clipped on perfectly. There was nothing, they were so well designed. They're German. I couldn't think, one thing I thought, well, they should have this, and then I'd look and they'd have it. They're expensive. They're worth the money, in my opinion. Yeah, Ruth.
Did you talk to other cyclists about the pros and cons of a trailer versus loading up your bike? Because it looked like that the guy with the dog had a trailer, and there was nothing on his bike.
There were many people who did that, and I did not sit down and, I mean, by that point I was committed to the panniers. But so I don't know the answer to that. Do you?
Personal preference.
Yeah.
But they have two wheels.
Yeah.
So they're wide, well, I don't know if they're wider than a packed bike. You're probably
No, it's about the same.
About the same width, so with the shoulder, width.
Yeah, somehow people with they did fine, because there were a bunch of people with those, and even with the no shoulder and stuff. What this one guy that had that trailer said to me was, he tends to, when it's no shoulder, he just rides out, he takes a lane. He takes a lane and makes the cars go around him, you know. Tom,
Did you take your bike from here to McLean?
we boxed our bikes up. In fact, Bud boxed my bike up because he'd spent all this time building it, and then we put them in a box and then shipped them on the airplane out for $50.
Have you made any special arrangements on the bike before you build the bike?
Bud built my bike, and my husband, if anybody know, for those of you that know him, is very fastidious. And so he sent us all sorts of pictures and directions about how to put the bike back together. And my brother and I are slapdash, but it all worked somehow. Don't tell Bud. Yeah. Oh,
You flew Southwest, didn't
yeah. Flew Southwest. Yeah.
you? How did I know that? $50
Dollars.
to fly, 'cause some of the other airlines are up to $200 to ship a bike.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yes.
Could you talk to people, or maybe you could come in on this, in terms of routes? I'm really kind of discouraged by what you, not that I want to do this, but by what you said about the traffic. It's great to have a route already planned out, and are these really the best? Or I know it would take forever to figure out other routes that aren't so traffic.
My oldest brother just, blazed his own trail.
Yeah, please.
And I'm going to let you talk about it for 1 minute, but I think out west there are not that many alternatives.
No, really, you have, first of all, you're allowed to truck ride on the interstate. There's no comparable, believe me, riding on the interstate is really not bad.
It isn't bad. We did that.
The shoulder is very wide. The truck drivers give you plenty of room. I never really had a problem with traffic. I guess I'm used to it. I grew up in the city, so I've ridden a lot in the city. I don't think Middlebury is so great, to be honest with you. And some of the people I was with when we came through Vermont, they had never been in Vermont before, and they were very discouraged by Vermont drivers. Very discouraged. I mean, no lanes, no shoulders, very few room to pass. Not the best. I'm used to it, again. But as you said, and you're right, there are very few north, south, or east, west options. Sometimes it's one road that goes to the state and that's it.
Okay, thanks.
And riding on the interstate was a pleasure. I hate to say that, but these trucks would go by, but they were way far away, and there was a rumble strip
Yeah.
between you and the traffic, and it was a breeze.
The only danger is passing across an exit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you gotta get across that exit very quickly.
Yeah.
You can ask him on some of them, they do.
We don't.
No, we don't. Yeah. The question was, how many states out there allow you to ride on the interstate? A lot of
Not
them.
that many, but I know Montana does, Texas does, Colorado does, Wyoming does. It's basically how many surface streets are there to avoid being on the interstate. Now, you
Yeah.
have to be careful, because if you're in the state and you're not sure, if you get on the interstate, there are some state troopers who will put you and your bike in their car, drive you back to where you started, get you off out of the car and say, now do it the proper way. And you've lost, and what you've been doing in a car in an hour is about 1 day's worth of cycling, so you gotta be careful.
So I didn't mean to discourage you, but I just, and Bud said, my husband said, don't talk about all the traffic. And I said, well, that's right, I'm trying not to, but it was hard for me.
Logging trucks in Harvard,
Logging trucks were scary.
narrow and winding.
Yeah. So just about that van, I did find the guy. The van that almost hit me, I spent time researching who the guy was. It was a commercial van. I found the company. I called him up after I arrived back in Vermont. And I said, and he and I had been exchanging phone calls. He worked for an air conditioning heating thing. So I said, I'm calling about Dighton, Kansas, the heating and air conditioning. And we were just exchanging messages. He said, well, let me tell you what I did for the refrigeration out there in that convenience store. He thought I was calling him about business. When I finally got him, I said, do you remember almost hitting a cyclist this summer? And he said, absolutely. I said, I think you came within about an inch. He said, you're right. He said, I came very close. He said, I didn't see you. He said, I saw the cyclist ahead of you, but I didn't see you. I'd gone around the car. I was coming back in, didn't see you. And I was not, the shoulder wasn't very big, so I was in the lane, right? And because it was bright sun, high, and he said, I just saw you at the very last minute. And he said, I should have stopped at the time. I'm sorry I didn't, and I'm very, very sorry. So, It was a very nice conversation. I wasn't angry. 'Cause, you know, if somebody does it on purpose, I would come out fighting. But it was clear to me it was just an error. So he's going to drive a little more carefully next time. Yeah. So, you know, but the difference in riding in Vermont is you ride these roads so much, you kind of know what to expect, and half the people are your neighbors, and it's probably an unearned sense of safety that I feel in Vermont. Yeah.
No, I was being defensive, because I love Vermont. I've been
Yeah.
here all my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just perspective.
Yeah. It is perspective. Yeah.
Could you have done that trip, your route, and not camped?
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
As you look at these maps, they have, in fact, a bunch of the other cyclists we were biking with would stay in hotels. Almost always you can do that. Yeah.
Given the fact that you were carrying as much weight as you were and riding occasionally on the rails to trails, did you ever wish that you had opted for more of a hybrid style bike? In terms of your flats and your broken rims and things like that?
My bike, I have to give credit to my husband, worked perfectly. I mean, it had a few flats, but it worked perfectly. My brother should have just gotten his bike, you know, tuned up after 20 years. So I didn't have any feeling about riding another type of bike. I was fine on that. Although my husband had put the shifters on the ends of the handlebars, and I'm used to them up here, and so I am not all that. My balance isn't great, so I would sometimes wobble about a little bit while I did that. So I wish that hadn't been, but he did that for the reason that they're easier to fix when you're on the road than to have them on there. Somebody else have a question? Yes.
Would you do that ride on your own, alone?
You know, when my brother, in the beginning, he really wasn't feeling well and his wife was so homesick, he almost went home. And I really struggled with, would I do it alone? And traveling around the world, which I've done, and doing this, I don't feel scared in terms of other people. And there's something nice about being a middle-aged or older as a woman. You know, people aren't looking at you. Like, I take my daughter to Africa, and she's blonde, and everybody in the world is after. But I never felt unsafe from a standpoint of feeling vulnerable as a woman. And I certainly could do it alone. But there's something nice, particularly if you have an incident where, I was worried about the traffic. It was great to have my brother there ride. I told him, ride behind me, and he would do whatever I said. So that was helpful. But I think I could do it alone. And you meet so many people, and you meet more people when you're alone almost than when you're with somebody else. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Yeah.
Just a comment. My younger brother did this ride, and very similar to yours, 30 years ago in 1980. And one of the things talking about people that he found, he stopped talking to people along the way because they kept taking him in and feeding him, and he got to the point that he felt like if I say something to someone, it's as if I feel like I'm asking for help, and I'm getting it. He had one bad incident all the way across the country, and that was with kids.
Yeah.
So people were really, really very nice.
Yeah, people took us in, and they were very nice. And for me, I like that, because for my brother, it was all about cranking out more miles. And for me, it's who can you meet? What are you going to learn about the way they live? What's in the local library? How does the local library, I got in there and we talked about children's programs and how they'd run it last year, and it was the same children's programs we'd run here, about dreaming. This is all really fun for me. I would like longer to do it and just to go at my own pace and stop whenever I wanted to and do it over 6 months instead of 3.
I'm just curious to compare notes. You're on one of those 100-mile roads of sagebrush, nothing in between where you start and where you stop. How do you fight the mental game? Especially if there are headwinds. I mean, how many times do you say, I'm done, I'm going home? This is ridiculous, this is stupid, why am I doing this?
I used to run marathons, and I used to say that in every marathon. But I love bike riding, and I don't know. I don't know how to tell you, but
Have those down moments where you just can't do another pedal stroke?
I am really obstinate and pig-headed and no. And until it really hit me that I was really, really what happened to me when I almost got hit was, I thought, okay, I'm 58. If I die tomorrow, I've gone around the world, I've been riding my bike, I can die, right? Not that I'm trying to kill myself, but it's okay. The minute that happened, I have a 21-year-old daughter and an 18-year-old son. And it was, they may think they don't need me, I still need to be their mother. And I came home like that. It was so crystal clear. I said, I'm either going to stay out here and die, or I'm going to go home with my kids. And my brother goes, well, there are other alternatives. I go, no, I don't see any. I don't see any. I'm going home. So that, when it hit me, it really hit me big. And it was grueling. But but on the average day, I'm just, somebody just puts my head down and I don't go there. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you actually answered one of my questions, which was, what was it, how would you describe what it was that told you enough, and you did that. The other was when you were riding around, especially coming across the Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, and the high plains of Colorado and western Kansas, did you see the wind farms, the massive, massive acres and acres of Tibet woods? They're stunning. They're like 30, 40 acres there are miles and miles and miles of massive wind farms from Colorado down in a plain, not on ridge lines, open space
Wow.
along the road in the fields next to the cattle and the individual areas.
And the individual.
It's really stunning, because the last time I'd done that, they hadn't been there in like in 10 years. Wow.
Wow. No, I saw grain elevators and but
Monumental wind farms going out 70
oil wells. That's right, oil wells. And yeah, I did. I guess it all depends on where the route goes. But that sounds fascinating. But I really didn't go by that. Okay. Thank you very much for coming. What a nice audience. Thank you. Thank you.